to the T-roh Show. Transmitting truth one week at a time.
Welcome to the 40th broadcast of the T-roh Show. This is your host, Keith. We got Stu on the line, and Tony's on a little vacation type deal. Say hello, Stu.
Hi, good afternoon.
All right, we got a lot to cover today on the T-roh Show. We also, the information you're about to get today is going to empower you and free your mind. Believe me, it will free your mind once this hits. And what we're going to be talking about is the essence of what you know as the system and how it operates and what it does. So let's get started. Very first thing we wanted to talk about was there's a Patriot type system, okay, process that was created by them, or you know, they were trying to tender promissory notes. I think that's what it was. They were trying to pay bills with a promissory note, and they would put it under tender of payment and all that, which was kind of really messed up. So let's get a few things establish some foundations here so that we can address the real problem and what's really happening in the country. We're quite excited about this, to be able to share this with everybody. So let's get started. So you have a term called tender of payment. You'll see tender everywhere. We're going to tender this and tender that. Well, it basically started out with the two types, or there's two types of tender, which is I promise to pay B or order the principal sum of $1,000 plus 10% interest, compounded annually, the principal and interest due and payable 1 year from the date of this instrument. That's one type. Okay. The second instrument is a variation. It reads, I promise to pay B or order the principal sum $1,000 plus 10% interest compounded annually, principal and interest due payable at the First National Bank of New York 1 year from the date of this interest, or this instrument, sorry. Okay, in both cases, A, as the maker of the note, you guys sign it, and we want to focus in on mortgage agreements today, okay, what mortgages are, and B as the payee. As long as B retains a right of payment on the note, he is termed the holder. So all you guys saying that you were the holder in due course of a note, that's not really what this is about, okay? Yes, you were off the mark, and yes, you will argue that to the letter, but we're trying to straighten this argument out, okay? The difference between the two notes is the second instrument is domiciled. That is payable at a place specified in the instrument. Notes may be domiciled anywhere, but the most common domicile is a bank. Okay, now I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. This is 23 pages. It'll put people to sleep in about 10 minutes. So what I'm going to say is this. A, okay, who's the maker of the note, gave a promissory note to B. He's the holder. A received $1,000 in cash in his hand. That means A got a plus $1,000. B is now a minus $1,000. So as long as A recognizes that, yes, you did receive that money in your hand, then B has the right to sue you if you don't pay him back at 10% interest. Okay, now under the tender of payment type system, what was happening is this was back in the day. We're going back in the 18, 17, 1600s, all that. The guy who loaned the $1,000 would take off, and the guy who borrowed it wouldn't be able to pay him at maturity, meaning within the 1 year or at the 1 year mark.
In other words, change of location was a lot more demanding.
Yeah.
Back then, tracking somebody down was a little tougher.
Right. So what would happen is there was no laws governing this. So 10 years later, B, the holder of the note, would come back and ask for the money. Plus, you owe me 10 years interest. When A couldn't find him to pay him off the first year. That's what tender of payment came. That was what that started. So they started creating a domicile type. So the A would go to First National Bank of New York or whatever other bank, it doesn't matter which bank it was, and pay it off there, or make the payments there. And then the third party, being the bank, would be the ACH, automatic clearinghouse, declaring that the note was paid as a witness.
Right, record keeper, however you want to phrase it. Mm-hmm.
Right, so, and so that would stop the interest, and that was called, I'm going to tender payment. Oh, this is my tender of payment on this note, and that would stop the interest there. It didn't happen in this country. What they did was they established what they called a constructive tender, and they started making laws where people could go to the court and put the money there. Place the money there, that yes, the note was tendered within the year specified, and that would stop the interest, lawyers' fees, or anything of that nature. That's what that was all about. Okay, so that means that in that particular area of tender of payment, cash was actually transferred. Cash was actually borrowed, literally borrowed.
Right. We're talking about a transaction like between you and I. I lend you $1,000. Then your family demands require you to go to a ranch in, a couple states away. You're on horse. It takes a while, and time goes by. I've used a local bank to domicile the note.
Yeah,
it's on record.
It's very simple.
Yep. Or vice versa. I leave the area and I leave the note domiciled with the bank, and you slip in and make regular payments.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I show up. I don't even have to call you or see you. I'm making payments and everything else. And when you come back and you say, hey, I'm going to tender this note, the bank comes in and says, okay, yeah, the full balance is here. All right, thank you very much. Have a good day. That's really all it is. But actual cash was changed. It did change hands from one to another. In other words, your balance, Stu, would be minus whatever money that was borrowed, and mine would be plus.
That's correct.
And then as I paid that down, your minus balance started going down. At the same time, the plus balance on this side started going down, all the way back down to zero. Okay? So if everybody can get a picture of that, what we're talking about. Now you understand that tender of payment is what it is. It's when money is borrowed and everything else, and then there was different ways to collect, to get all the crime out of it. Now, it's been well and long established, okay? And then we can go into your own personal experiences. When you guys went and signed a promissory note at the bank, did you ever receive the cash? That's the whole thing. Most people will say, well, I got a check. Check is demand for payment. It's not cash. Did you ever get the cash in your hand? That's the question.
And what type of cash was it?
Right.
Which
so
we'll cover.
If you didn't get the cash, why is it that when you bought and I'm sure you've been through plenty of house closings, correct?
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if because I've experienced this also. You go into a room and you sign a bunch of paperwork, man. There's you're there for an hour signing crap.
That's correct.
And then you sign a promissory note and everything else. Then the lady takes off. It's like, where'd you go? And she comes back and says, okay, here are the keys. You bought your house. The what? What do you mean? Well, that's it. You got your house. Okay.
That's right.
And that's all that happens.
That's right.
Okay, there was a guy named Tom Schaff. I don't know if anybody remembers him or not. It was a long time ago. I think he's dead now. I'm not sure. But all of a sudden he kind of dropped off, and we didn't hear him from for a while. And then I heard later on he was dead. He was in the banking industry for about 10 years as an accountant, and he started looking at the books, and he noticed that on the books after every loan it would say plus amount instead of negative amount. He couldn't figure out why. So he kept going on, and over a 10-year period, he kept collecting all this little bits of evidence and then finally put it all together. And what he put together is that no money was ever borrowed when you went to a bank. And it took me 4 to 5 times of listening to him on a tape. And this is back when they used to, there was no, internet. And we used to transfer little tapes, cassette tapes, back and forth to each other and through the mail. And I was sitting listening to that cassette tape, and I had to listen to it about 4 or 5 times to understand what the man was telling me, because I didn't get it. He says over and over again, and this was an hour-long tape, the bank never loaned you any money. No money ever exchanged hands. The bank never loaned you money. No money ever exchanged hands. Over and over and over. He says, they didn't come out of anybody's account. It didn't do this. It didn't do that. What he said was, over and over, was the promissory note was deposited into the bank under an account into an account in the name of the bank. And he said this over and over again until I got it. When you sign the promissory note, that promissory note, and he kept saying that promissory note was the money. That's the money. He was trying to get it through everybody's head that the promissory note you signed was what was deposited into the account in the name of the bank. Then they wrote a check off of it. So, which means that the money that you supposedly borrowed did not come from anybody else's account. It didn't come from an IRA. It didn't come from any kind of 401k plan. Nobody's account. The promissory note was the money, or is the money. That's how he did it. That's how he explained it over and over again. And then we found out later he was absolutely right. That the promissory note was the money, which sparked off all this holder in due course, holder of the note stuff from a lot of patriot groups that didn't really fully understand what was going on and what was happening to them. So yes, they were off the mark. And it's actually a very ingenious, brilliant scheme once you fully understand what's going on. So to reiterate that, when you go in and sign the promissory note was what was deposited into the account. And then the bank wrote a check off of it. No cash ever transferred. Essentially, you didn't buy anything because there was no money that was transacted. When they deposited the promissory note into the account, they said the account was paid in full. Then they turn around and add a second instrument to it, which is a mortgage agreement. And then they have you sign that mortgage agreement, calling it a debt. So essentially what they're doing is they're loaning back your promise to pay at interest. That's all it is. You sign it, they loan it back to you at interest. And they expect you to get notes and give that back to them every month. Give that to them every month. So the bank had nothing invested, nothing at risk. However, that is not the premise of the t-roh show today. We just have to explain that to understand the real deal on what they're really doing. Okay, so you can play this part back a couple of times. You really have to listen to it to understand what we're talking about when it comes to the promissory note, no money exchange hands, and all that. And then people will go, well, that's theft, that's this. Okay, just hold on a second. It's going to get even better than that. So what I'm going to do is show you a document that was handed to me. And it came off of the U.S. Department of Treasury. And here's the HTTPS here. It's treasury.gov resource center, FAQs currency. Okay. So this is not me saying it. This is them. Now, I thought the United States currency was legal tender for all debts. Some businesses and governmental agencies say that they will only accept checks, money orders, or credit cards as payment, and others will only accept currency notes in denominations of $20 or smaller. Isn't this illegal? Okay, now the pertinent portion of the law that applies to your question is the Coinage Act of 1965, specifically Section 315103, entitled Legal Tender, which states, United States coins and currency, including Federal Reserve notes and circulating notes of Federal Reserve banks and national banks, are legal tender for all debts public, charges, taxes, and dues. Notice they didn't say public and private. Okay, Federal Reserve, they created private themselves. All right, this statute means that the United States money as identified above are valid and legal offer of payment for debts when tendered to a creditor. There is, however, no federal statute mandating that a private business, a person, or an organization must accept currency or coins as for payment for goods and services. Private businesses are free to develop their own policies on whether or not to accept cash unless there is a state law which says otherwise. For example, a bus line may prohibit payment of fares in pennies or dollar bills. In addition, movie theaters, convenience stores, and gas stations may refuse to accept large denomination currency, usually notes above $20, as a matter of policy.
Yeah, and if you just want to quickly stop there, that I want to reemphasize. I see people, particularly millennials, 30s and a little younger, talk about how they think it's rubbish. They don't use that word, of course, but where you go to 7-Eleven and they've got a sign saying they'll accept nothing larger than $20 bills and things like that. But you see right here that they're capable of doing that.
Right, because they're private, and basically this falls under private membership associations, and in their policies and all this other kind of crap, they're supposedly, for the United States businesses, supposedly protected by the First, Fifth, and 14th Amendment. We'll get into that. That's a whole other t-roh show. I think we've talked about it before, though.
Yeah. Okay,
so let's move on. It says, what are Federal Reserve notes, and how are they different from United States notes? Okay, Federal Reserve notes are legal tender currency notes. 12 Federal Reserve banks issue them into circulation pursuant to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. You'll notice there was no other type of act, just this one. Goes all the way back to 1913. Yet in the courts, they don't want to take any cases prior 1930, right? There's a little bit of hypocrisy going on there. A commercial bank belonging to the Federal Reserve System can obtain Federal Reserve notes from the Federal Reserve Bank in its district whenever it wishes. It must pay for them in full, dollar for dollar, by drawing down its account with its district Federal Reserve Bank. Fair enough. Federal Reserve banks obtain the notes from our Bureau of Engraving and Printing. It pays the BEP, that's Bureau of Engraving and Printing, for the cost producing the notes, which then become liabilities of the Federal Reserve banks and obligations of the United States government. And when we say United States government, we're talking about Manhattan Island and the District of Columbia. So it goes a little deeper here. Congress has specified that the Federal Reserve Bank must hold collateral equal in value to the Federal Reserve notes that the bank receives. This collateral is chiefly gold certificates and United States securities. Has anybody ever seen gold certificates before? I haven't. Nobody else has. Apparently, that's just something that we just have to have faith in and believe in, that that's what's going on. This provides backing for the note issue. The idea was that if the Congress dissolved the Federal Reserve System, the United States would take over the notes liabilities. This would mean the requirements of Section 411 meet the requirements of Section 411, but the government would also take over the assets, which would be of equal value. Federal Reserve notes represent a first lien on all assets of the Federal Reserve banks and on the collateral specifically held against them. We'll get back there. We'll get back to this in just a few. Okay. That's a huge statement, by the way. Now, Federal Reserve notes are not redeemable in gold, silver, or other commodity and receive no backing by anything.
What's that again?
Yeah. No backing by anything. Okay. This has been the case since 1933. Now, if you start bringing up 1933 in the courts, you're a sovereign citizen, domestic terrorist, and we're throwing you in jail. Okay. They do that all the time.
Yeah, because they clearly don't want anybody sniffing around.
No. Because they could find out what you guys are getting ready to find out here in just a few minutes. The notes have no value for themselves, but for what they will buy. In another sense, because they are legal tender, Federal Reserve notes are backed by all the goods and services in the economy. Okay, so what is the U.S. Department of Treasury actually saying? What are they actually saying here? That Federal Reserve notes are backed by all the goods and services in the economy. Now, what's happening now? Let's go back to the mortgage agreement. You walk in. Now, what do you have to do? You have to fill out an application. Then what do? They go to your credit report, of which way you can get it, I think, free on creditkarma.com. They have commercials constantly on creditkarma.com. How wonderful and easy it is to get your credit score. And then they show it's either 870, 540, you suck, 600, you're okay, 750, yeah, you're getting better, 840, oh, you're the greatest.
Right.
Okay.
And I have a screen share if you want to pull something up, but let's see here.
So you have to go in there, and then you have to give that credit report. Then they come back, and if you've got an 840, 850, or even higher or whatever, you're the greatest guy in the world. And man, they're going to give you the lowest interest rate they could possibly find.
You should have Experian. This is one of the agencies that compiles a credit score. There's typically a typical transaction uses 3 credit scores. It's called a tri-merge. But what's a good credit score? Just as Keith was saying, they break them down. It's a numerical score, 300 to 850. 700 and above is generally considered good. 800 is excellent. Most scores fall within the 600 and 750 range. Higher the score, the better the credit risk.
The decision.
And we'll talk about what that really means soon.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not going to be explained here. But what they do pretty much is they'll take any given individual, and they'll say, okay, what are we analyzing? They analyze how much the credit card balance is in relation to the credit limit. So if you've got a $5,000 credit limit and your balance is $1,000 or your balance is $5,000, it matters. How long you've had that credit card. When was the last activity you what was the date of the last activity you conducted on that credit card, or loan or auto loan? All forms of credit are monitored, but all these things have particular weighted values, and they're all added together at the end to give a score for that credit. But people have multiple credit cards. People have multiple loans. People have multiple car loans. So a credit report is going to reflect everybody's credit profile, where all these individual accounts are analyzed and then combined to give this overall credit score that they're talking about here, the 300 to 850. Okay. I hope that was kind of a clear explanation. So Right. They cross-reference characteristics of your use of credit. In other words, the way you use the credit that has been extended to you. And that fluctuates, and you can with an organized effort, you as an individual can manipulate your credit score to the good. You make 8, 10, 15 payments, timely payments, correct amounts, etc., and you're gonna boost your credit score. In fact, indeed, you can go and you can, as a quick example, you could go and get a Home Depot card with the purchase of $300 worth of house siding or something. Let's say you're doing a repair around the house, and that $300 that you've taken out with the Home Depot card, you pay that back either lump sum, or you pay that back in over the course of 4 or 5 months in a timely manner, and that's going to be a big benefit to your credit score. Okay, so my point I'm trying to make is that they're monitoring small amounts of money as well as hundreds of $1,000 lines of credit with mortgages and things like that. Okay, all of that stuff is monitored. I know because I used to lend. In fact, I lent before credit scores were introduced into the industry. When I was an underwriter back in the day, I had to cross-reference people's backgrounds and make intellectual decision of risk. But that was replaced in the late 80s, early 90s with this credit score. But that's how the credit score works.
Okay. So that means that every part of your life is monitored. Every part of that, in other words, that credit score is basically everything. Now, why is it everything? When you go into the bank, you just saw what the U.S. Department of Treasury said, that the Federal Reserve notes that you're supposedly borrowing aren't backed by anything other than goods and services. So obviously, the house is not collateral for that money. It's not backed by it. So what's really going on? This is what's going on. When you walk into that bank and everything else, and you're going to do what you're going to do, you are judged based on your credit score. Your credit score is developed based on your service to the community. If you serve the community well, it will reflect in your credit score, because it will show that you go and you're a productive citizen, and that you go to a job and you pay those bills. You're responsible enough. You're a good, productive citizen. Now, the fact is, you don't really use any money at all. You get credits. So when you go and work for Walmart, or you go work for this, or you have your own business or whatever. See, people with their own businesses, the small businesses and things, very difficult for them to get loans. If you're working for one of their corporations, you can get a loan fairly quickly. Okay, so, and you can get, as long as you pay those bills responsibly, the credit card payments and all this other stuff, you'll have a very high credit score. Now, what happens when you default on that? You become homeless. So, folks, what form of government does that? That if you don't perform for them, you lose everything? That would be called, and when I say this word, they're both the same, okay? You have a socialist system. A socialist and a communist system. When I say socialism, I say communism. When I say communism, I'm saying socialism. They're both basically the same. So what's happening is when you walk in there, what are you doing? You're actually making a political decision to join with the Socialist Party. It's a political declaration of status disguised as a mortgage note or promissory note and a mortgage agreement. Okay? That's what you're doing. And this has been going on since when? 1933. Each and every one of you have been socially engineered as a socialist and have declared at one time or another, without you knowing it, a member of the Socialist Party.
Yeah, let's jump into this screen share real quick. Is it showing up?
Yeah.
Encyclopedia Britannica, just, for credibility purposes. Pledge allegiance. And we go down here, and I just want to quickly go through this. It's not going to take long. What do you learn in school?
You're
beginning
just
at what?
Reading this, we have to state you're just reading this.
Yep.
You're not taking.
And I'm not even going to read the entire thing.
Okay.
I just want to read the first couple. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Okay. Flag of the United States of America. We've established over and over United States of America as a company. So you're pledging allegiance to the company and to the republic for which it stands. Note that. They're telling you right there. Okay? It's not the republic. They're telling you it. The republic for which it stands. United States of America, according to them, stands for the republic. It isn't the republic. So you're pledging allegiance to a corporate flag. Now we can introduce the idea of this political allegiance.
Right.
And people can understand, I think, perhaps a little bit more of what's really going on here. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, let me go ahead and share screens. Okay, so now we have to know what is an ism. Okay, so let's go to definition of ism. A distinctive doctrine, cause, or theory. An oppressive and especially discriminatory attitude or belief. I'm going to say that again because I think my connection was going bad there. An oppressive and especially discriminatory attitude or belief. An oppressive and especially discriminatory attitude or belief. That's what they call separation between the rich and poor. That's not a separation between the rich and poor. That is a separation between those who have basically sold their soul to socialism and those have not. So let's go to socialism. The definition of socialism is a political term applied to an economic system in which property is held in common and not individually. Now you understand why you're not really owning the property? Why you're called a tenant later on after a foreclosure for all those who have been through a foreclosure? The relationships are governed by a political hierarchy. Common ownership doesn't mean decisions are made collectively. However, instead, individuals in positions of authority make decisions in the name of the collective group. Now you understand why Hillary and all those other guys say that people have to have respect for authority? You have to have respect for authority. We must
Big brother.
We must have order. That's Umbridge, right?
Yeah.
On Harry Potter. We must have order. Okay. Regardless of the picture painted of socialism by its proponents, it ultimately removes group decision making in favor of the choices of one all-important individual. So what did that basically describe? A dictatorship. That's what it is. And it always has been. So since 1933, folks, you have had and lived under a dictatorship. And what you've been actually living with is social engineering.
No republic.
No republic whatsoever. So your mortgage note is a political decision that you didn't know about. Now, whenever you use the word, here's the Bank of New York Mellon, headquarters, I don't care if you put the word corporate on there, you put the word headquarters on anything, that's a political party, folks. It always has been. Political party headquarters. The Bank of New York Mellon is not a bank. It's a political party headquarters of the Socialist Party. And it has branches. Okay, within it, that that do nothing more than confiscate and steal property for the Socialist Party. Says this provides backing for the notes. The idea was that if Congress dissolved the Federal Reserve System, okay, the United States would take over the notes liabilities. This would meet the requirements of Section 411, information 411. But the government would also take over the assets of which would be of equal value. Boom. That's called socialism. Because you don't own the property is collectively owned in common. All private property, gone, out the window. So when you default on it, what happens? They're not, you haven't had, folks, you haven't had a foreclosure in this country since 1933. Foreclosures never existed, have not existed since 1933. The political party is coming in and taking what? All of its property away from you because you failed to serve the community and therefore you are a bad socialist. We're going to kick you out. Didn't it just say it was discriminatory? That's what they said.
Yeah. So you're really going into a bank. Well, let's rephrase. You're really going into a
political party,
a chapter, right? Yeah. And it's dressed up as a bank, and you're declaring your allegiance to their system. For that allegiance, they give you
a car,
or
a job,
a home, or a job. Exactly. Yeah. They give it to you. There's no money involved. They're bestowing that stuff on you, on your allegiance. Then what do? They monitor your allegiance.
Through your credit score.
Exactly. Through the credit score. And the credit score, as we've already discussed, has, plateau breakdowns. And as you get higher in the credit score, things become easier. They'll bestow more upon you. If you fail, if you run into obstacles, as most of us do with car accidents and things, and your credit score dips, they start not bestowing things upon you. And you have a more difficult time acquiring credit. In other words, the ability just to have things handed to you.
Because you weren't responsible enough to get AFLAC.
Exactly.
See? They have AFLAC in there to insure you and insure your what? Your allegiance to the political party. The Socialist Party. It's all social engineering. You haven't had any banks in this country since 1933 because they don't loan any money. Banks loan money. That's the essence of a bank. That's what it does. It loans money. And it's supposed to come out of everybody else's account, or whoever wants to, pledge a certain amount to a particular loan, investment, or anything like that. But that's not what's really going on. They're just creating the money. They're not really even creating the money because there's no money. See, I even get stuck in it because we always thought this way. We were raised this way. We all were raised this way, but there's no money changed hands, period. So there can't be a foreclosure. So therefore what? B cannot tender for payment because he never gave anything. So there is no creditor in the system. He never gave you any money. That's how they operate.
Yeah, and they keep all the labels and they keep all the names and stuff in place to mask what's really occurring. But I'll give you a quick basically a real life example. I used to be in this industry, and one of the areas that I pursued was investment property ownership. And there was a time in my life where I was wearing expensive suits, and I was at any given time in any given calendar year, I might have had 4, 6 properties that I was financing, that I had a couple renters, I had a couple that I was flipping for profit. Anyway, the point of the story is that during those years, I didn't go to the bank and wait in line. I was met, 15 feet walking through the door by the assistant manager. Handshake, cup of coffee. Let's go into my office in the back room. Okay. The point of this story is that because it was all tied to my credit score, you see, I was juggling hundreds of thousands of dollars at once through 5, 6 properties, and making payments on some of those and paying off some of them, also borrowing at, purchasing, at the time. So I was a transaction hound. But what was I really doing? I was walking in there and continually showing my allegiance
to the Socialist Party.
Right.
Not even knowing it.
Not even knowing it. Nope. Had no clue. I thought I was conducting business, and then of course, things, in 2008, things, they pulled a lot of cash out of the system. So banks that were, that I, was quote financed with, started to go under. My credit lines started to get closed as a result. And then all of a sudden I'm not capable of meeting some of these demands. Things begin to unravel. And all of a sudden I'm not being brought into the assistant manager or the manager's office anymore for coffee, where they would do my transactions there personally.
Because it's a discriminatory system, folks. They discriminate against you. They didn't care what color you are. What they cared about was your allegiance. Your allegiance is your currency with the Socialist Party. Your allegiance with the Socialist Party is your currency. So the Socialist Party went in and they stole all of the assets into one political party, communist socialist, through a mechanism and vehicle called the Federal Reserve System. Which means they had control since 1913 and even earlier than that, without you even knowing it. That's why you got the Republican and Democratic Party as 527 organizations or private companies. The Socialist Party went in, stole all these assets by not loaning any money, but they gave the appearance that they did, and started, and every time a Federal Reserve note is used, they're saying, oh, that's the first lien holder right there. That's first lien, when it's not backed by anything. It's just a vehicle of which they steal. Now they go in and they go in and now it's nothing more than pure political.
Yeah, I've got a quick screen share here. This is just information I compiled to show you a quick timeline as we were going through this stuff. In February 33, Michigan is the first state to declare a bank holiday, 1933. Okay. March, 3 weeks later, Delaware is the last one to close its banks. Franklin Delano Roosevelt gets inaugurated on March 4th. On March 6th, 2 days after he's put into power, they announce a national banking holiday. Okay. 3 days after that, they bring out the Emergency Banking Act. That reopens the 12 regional Federal Reserves on March 13th. And then in April, okay, so really 1 month's gone by since they closed the banks, they confiscate the gold, declare criminal possession of monetary gold, criminality of possessing gold. That's the cycle that turned this into a will bestow stuff upon you if you play into our socialist system. It's called the New Deal.
Right. Now, what happened then? Everybody says they went bankrupt. Now, I'm going to show you what happened. This is a proclamation by the current United States in Congress Assembly. I'm going to read this to you. And this will answer all of your questions on what happened in 1933, what's going on with the system, everything else. All right? So, listen to this carefully. The proclamation of the existence of the default of the guarantee of a Republican form of government tendered by a Congress of the United States. So there was no mass bankruptcy in 1933. All they did was default on the guarantee of a Republican form of government, because remember, it was a company that was created to create states, to create, that's what it did. That's all it ever did. And so they put in a corporate guarantee that of a Republican form of government within that in order to sell it to the public. That everybody wanted a Republican form. Well, a Republican form is nothing more than people that have power of attorney for you. That's why you want a republic form without the AN. But they sold it to everybody, and that's what happened. Okay. So they defaulted in 1933 on the guarantee. That's it. That's all that happened. So that they could usher in their new socialist system. Where now, every day, I'm going to read this to you, and you're going to see clearly what has happened and what the Socialist Party really is. The United States in Congress Assembly hereby proclaims the existence of the default on the guarantee of a Republican form of government defaulted in 1933. Huge statement there. Because everybody thinks that all these other theories, but that's really what happened. This proclamation serves as international public notice to the international community that the U.S. Congress does not officially exist, and that it is in fact a disguise of a non-elected socialist and communist party. Remember, it used to be called Congress of the United States. Now it's U.S. Congress. Y'all get the change? They switched. You can't switch entities like that. The Federal Reserve System and its member banks are not banks under nor subject to any monetary policy whatsoever. That's why they can't be what do you call it? Audited. Because they're political parties. One political party can't audit another one. They are in fact a socialist party headquarters that disguise political declarations of status as loans and mortgage agreements. They disguise political declarations of status as loans and mortgage agreements. So when you're signing the mortgage agreement, you do not know, because it's not a mortgage, because no money is ever transferred. That's not what it is. It's a combined with your credit score and Aflac and creditkarma.com, what they're doing is they're socially engineering you.
Mm-hmm. It's a pledge of allegiance.
It's a pledge of allegiance to the Socialist Party. And whenever you have a system where your allegiance is your currency, you need some help, bro, because they require you perform that allegiance on a daily basis. That's called what? UDHR 4, slavery.
Right. Now throw into just for, I know you got more to cover in the stock, but just throw in, based on that, the more demands, now you got the drive for the cashless society.
Yeah.
And, what's that all about? That, of course, is so that they can punish that much more quickly for bad behavior.
That's right. And also, it was actually the U.S. Congress that created the Bitcoin. People don't know that. They did it. It wasn't against them. They marketed it like Bitcoin is the way out of oppression. They created it. U.S. Congress created it.
Yeah, that's beta testing.
Yeah, they're the ones that did it. And does everybody know that the U.S. Congress is also a part of BRIC? and they tried to sell it like the Russia was being the hero and everything, fighting this oppression of the United States and all that. Well, it actually came from the States. The Socialist Party created it. So, people, it's easy to get tricked by these guys. They're slick. Now, these political parties have been trafficking the people from one political venue to another without their knowledge and consent, and thereby using people as test subjects without their knowledge and consent under a grand social experiment, usually referred to as social engineering. After reviewing the evidence provided, it has been determined by the United States and Congress assembled, with full authority to regulate foreign businesses within the metes and bounds of the United States of America, which, by the way, folks, is not a corporation. It never has been. That's why it was placed as the organic laws of the United States of America under the Articles of Confederation, organic meaning not corporation, as per the Articles of Confederation as amended in convention on August 5th, 2015. Now, the definition of socialism is any of the various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and the administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. A system of society or group living in which there is no private property. A system or condition of society in which means of production are owned and controlled by the state. A stage of society in Marxist theory transitional between capitalism and communism, and distinguished by unequal distribution of goods and pay according to work done. And pay according to work done. You serve society, you have a great credit score, and man, do you get privileges. You are the man walking in that bank. Oh, hello, Mr. Smith. Come on in. Come on in. We got a good political party member here. Have you ever thought about running for office? Blah, blah, blah. Why, folks, do you think you have the same people in Washington and have had them in there for 50 to 60 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the same party.
Yeah, and real quick to add detail to that, I'm sure everybody's heard of, no income verification loans, no doc loans. Well, that's what this is all about. I remember my example. I could go in there.
Walked in and signed something.
Exactly. I didn't have to. After a while, I mean, in the first bunch, I had to go through all the same processes that everybody else goes through for mortgages and stuff. But eventually, I just walked in there and said, "Yeah, this is the house I'm targeting." Oh, okay, sign here. Done. No, yeah. There was no doc submission and all that stuff.
Man. All right. The Federal Reserve System is a vehicle and a straw man to steal assets into the Socialist and Communist Party. And this goes on and on. So whenever you go to their bank, you're producing something, you think you're getting somewhere and the economy is growing. That's actually being processed and back into, as first lien holder, back into the Socialist Party. So anything you're creating, they're sucking into their party. So the more you produce, the more you create, the bigger they get. So the U.S. Congress is found to be engaged in socialism and social engineering to a point of converting local Walmarts into civil disobedience centers for the purpose of forced training subjects into productive citizens, quotations, within its socialist and or communist party in violation of all 30 articles of the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and multiple war crimes and crimes against humanity. The enforcement of said violations are being enforced by the U.S. military and various agencies against civilians. This is happening right now.
It's been happening.
Yes. And you know why why are those people not arrested? They're a terrorist group.
Incredible. I was just going to bring Antifa up. Think about last week's show, Antifa. We read some of the harsher elements of
Antifa, and then go to St. Louis. Remember, St. Louis this whole weekend they were there.
So what's really going on, folks? Is it a bunch of rebels that are against fascism? No. They're getting, in my opinion, they're getting desperate out of concern about the national sovereignty movement that's, sweeping across the globe. And they are now prepared, meaning the socialists are now prepared to do violence to attempt to keep this system in place on a street level.
Okay, so remember the U.S. Congress says they keep going by the Constitution, right? Well, they're operating under default, consistently gives false and misleading statements to the United Nations when it does not lawfully exist and is in violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and therefore the U.S. government does not legally own any assets contrary to its international and public claims. It doesn't own squat. It's completely broke because everything you have is, if everything you have is stolen, you don't own anything. That's reality. Be it resolved by the United States and Congress assembled that all violations of international law will be arrested upon the warrant issued by the Chief of the Human Rights Tribunal International and prosecuted by the Office of the Governor for the Government of the United States of America. Further, any and all states, counties, townships, and cities are required to register assets with the Office of the Treasury for the Government of the United States of America as a safeguard measure so the assets can be returned to the people immediately. We're not trying to grab it, we're just trying to get it to you. And this government is going to need your support for that. We're trying to get your stuff to you. The fastest we can, this is what we're going to do. All right. Further be it resolved that the organization and individuals that are involved in the aforementioned entities are considered international fugitives from justice and hereby classified as international human rights violators and war criminals under penalty of crimes against humanity. Do you know how many people they have killed in this thing? How many people have been killed under the Socialist Party? It has been war after war. You had the Second World War, then you had Korea.
Mm-hmm. And these are all these are all to help implement this. They weren't just natural occurrences. That was to assist in the installation of the New Deal and all this stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Right. And didn't we say that in one of the t-roh shows, under a communist regime, there more people die than any other type of regime?
Yeah, I think we did establish that.
Yeah. And you guys, folks, today, right now, all of you are living this. Who knew that your local bank was actually the Socialist Party headquarters?
Yeah. I've got a screen share too that it seems like a good time to show this. We've mentioned this fellow before, Edward Mandell House. And he was kind of a influential guy back in the turn of the century. I'm going to just scroll down. A lot of this article's a biography, but here we have Ed House interacting with President Woodrow Wilson. This is the president that allowed the Federal Reserve Act. And I want to specifically highlight right here. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. Right there.
Let's keep going there for a second. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback from our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being unable to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of law, merchant, under the scheme of secured transactions.
Under the scheme. So he's telling you right there. First of all, there's no secured transactions. It's a scam.
Yeah.
And how about this right here?
Now, why do you have so many people in jail in this country? The reason is because they're being re-socially engineered. Okay, this is what happens when you go there. You end up in this little pen, I call it. It's a little cage, okay? And actually, you can get into like a 12-bed or 16-bed place, and they're bunk beds. And then they have a window. There's a hallway outside, and they have a window sitting there. and the guards go by and look at you in the window like you're at a freaking zoo, right? And they come in and count you about every 5 hours. You know, everybody's counted and all this other stuff.
Yep.
And what they do is they let you sit there for a while, for about 2-3 months, and then they start offering you a job. They say, "Hey, how would you like to be trustee and start serving serving food, three meals a day?" Well, you're sick and tired of being in there, right? And sitting there just basically doing nothing. You have a TV sitting there, and you got noise constantly. Okay, everybody's noisy, and you can barely sleep because they're flushing the toilet all night. It's bad. All right, and so you're thinking, great, I can get out of here. So you end up going there, and then they call you a trustee. Now you're what? You're serving the community. As you serve the community, you get more privileges, and then you start getting a little bit of pay, 10 cents, 15 cents an hour, all this kind of stuff. And you're able to get out, and then you're able to use that money to go to the commissary and get little special things. You can get all their little toys, you know, the Twinkies and all that kind of crap that they sell you, and the Bob Barker soap, and your life becomes a little bit better. And then they start taking time off for good behavior, because why? They've socially engineered you for community service. You don't own any property, you just get paid for what you're doing. And as you perform more community service within the Socialist Party and go by their socialist edicts, then you get out and you become what? A productive citizen in the socialist system. You're a chattel, basically. You're a good little boy.
Yeah. So let's actually pull one more thing. I've had this up for a couple minutes, so most of the people that are viewing this have probably read it. But for those that are listening on a phone, Americans, this is the same Edward House. Americans will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us profit, and they will be none the wiser.
There's your credit score.
Yep.
So not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans, and if by accident one or two should figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. It's a bank. It shows it right there. That's the name. We give out loans every day, blah, blah. No, you don't. You don't give out any of that crap. We know it. Okay, this is called criminal activity, folks. It says, after all, bring that back up. Hold on a second. I want to bring that back up because the rest of it
okay, no problem. Stand by.
And they do talk about it here. It says by accident, or should figure out, we have our arsenal of plausible deniability. It says, after all, this is the only logical way to fund government. According to your sick ass, yeah. The only logical way to fund government by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. What is registrant? You're registered with the Socialist Party in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits, because they're not paying you anything. You don't own anything beyond our wildest expectations, and leave every American a contributor to this fraud. It's called fraud, which we call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. It says the people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. Dummy corporation, U.S. Congress.
Ooh. Tells it like it is, I guess, huh?
Yes, he does. Please share this content with all your friends. This is probably one of the most important programs we've done on the T-roh show. This information will free your mind. And that's what we're after. Free your mind. We do have a bank called the Continental Public Bank. Open an account. We do offer loans there. and all these types of things that normal banks do. And no, it is not a political party headquarters. It's not disguised. It is an actual bank. ContinentalPublicBank.com. I usually leave the links in the below on the videos. So anything else we need to cover? Because that's going to be a huge thing for people to deal with.
No, I think that's plenty.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's plenty.
Thank you for listening to the t-roh Show, folks. We do appreciate all the subscriptions. Please subscribe. We do appreciate all the comments, and share it with your friends. Say goodbye, Stu.
See you next week. Enjoy the work week, if you can.
A democracy is ruled by the mob. The mob always votes themselves every kind of benefit that they can vote themselves. And whenever you do that, it means large, tremendously overpowering government in control.
They vote themselves into dependency.
That's it. They vote themselves into a dictatorship is what they do, where they lose all of the benefits that they intended to vote themselves into in the first place.
Okay.
And democracies are extremely dangerous to minorities, because if the majority of people don't like you,
right,
they're going to vote that they kill you, and they can, you know, that's it. Democracies are dangerous. Democracies are socialists. Democracies are communism. That's what communism is. The definition of communism is everybody doing according to their talents and receiving according to their need. And it doesn't work. We already know it doesn't work. Man, by his inherent nature, is greedy. So those at the top always end up having everything, and those at the bottom end up having nothing in communism. Socialism is different. Socialism usually ends up in a dictatorship, in a very controlling dictatorial government which even owns the people that it governs, so that those who live in fear of not having are provided for what they need, and in turn they worship this oppressive government. Socialists are children who went out into the world, took a look around and said, I can't handle it, and went home to Daddy.
Okay.
Daddy, protect me. Daddy, feed me. Daddy, loan me your car. Daddy, tuck me in at night. Socialists are scared little children who are irresponsible, can't stand on their own 2 feet, and need Daddy to take care of them.
Okay.
Okay?
And now we got the...
But what happens when you go home to Daddy and Daddy does all these things for you? Tell me.
Well, you never leave the home. You've got no reason to. In other words, if you're being provided for in that way.
You're being provided for, but what does it mean? Doesn't it mean that you have to do what Daddy tells you to do?
True.
Doesn't it mean you have to be in when Daddy tells you to be in? Doesn't it mean that you can't drive the car to the next town if Daddy tells you you can't? Doesn't it mean that if Daddy tells you to take out the trash, you better take out the trash? Are you beginning to understand the concept? When you ask for favors from Daddy, you have to give up freedom in return.
Right. Okay.
So socialism always leads to repression of liberty, freedom, equality. All of those things fly out the window, so that you can have free health care, so that you can have a place to live but you don't have to pay the rent, so that you can have food given to you by the state. And that's where we're headed.
Some of the leading socialists of the past have shown that they too have chosen up sides. One such individual was Adolf Hitler, the head of the German government during World War II, who held no conviction that the murder of over 50 million people during that war was wrong. He considered himself to be an agent of this unseen God in reducing the population of people that he held to be undesirable. He wrote, quote, I have the right to exterminate millions of individuals of inferior races which multiply like vermin, unquote. And he did what he considered acceptable inside his religion. Those who did not believe in his new religion had no choice, and they perished. The evidence that Adolf Hitler was a New Ager will be presented later in this series. Another of the leading spokesmen for the socialist position was George Bernard Shaw, a well-known writer during his day. He wrote a book entitled The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Socialism, in which he stated, quote, I also made it quite clear that socialism means equality of income or nothing, and under socialism you would not be allowed to be poor. You would be forcibly fed, clothed, lodged, taught, and employed whether you like it or not, whether you're useful or not, even if it were discovered that you had not the character and industry enough to be worth all this trouble. You might be executed in a kindly manner, but whilst you were permitted to live, you would have to live well, unquote. Socialism is the greatest perversion, deception, and lie that has ever existed on the face of this earth, and has brought nothing but misery, death, poverty to people who have been subjected to its cruelties. The Masonic writer Albert Pike placed the Masonic order into the discussion when he wrote this in his book Morals and Dogma. Quote, "It is not true to say that one man, however little, must not be sacrificed to another, however great, to a majority or to all men. That is not only a fallacy, but a most dangerous one. Often one man and many men must be sacrificed to the ordinary sense of the term to the interest of the many. The interest and even the life of one man must often be sacrificed to the interest and welfare of his country," unquote. The religious view is that the sacrifice of one life for the interest of the many is murder. And those who believe in the God of the Bible are told not to commit this act. The commandment against this practice is contained in Exodus 20, verse 13 of the Old Testament, and in Matthew 5, verse 21 in the New. And is simply expressed in these simple words, quote, "Thou shalt not kill," unquote. The principle is easy to understand. No person has the right to take the life of another. This understanding is nearly worldwide. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, a German philosopher and one of the teachers of many of the world's leading communist revolutionaries and international socialists, put the argument quite succinctly in this statement, quote, "I condemn Christianity. I raise against the Christian church the most terrible of all accusations that any accuser uttered. It is to me the highest conceivable corruption," unquote. Other parties wish to join the debate. In 1911, the Socialist Party of Great Britain published a pamphlet entitled Socialism and Religion, in which they placed their position about religion into the arena. Quote, "It is therefore a profound truth that socialism is the natural enemy of religion. A Christian socialist is in fact an anti-socialist. Christianity is the antithesis of socialism," unquote. So the socialist, the New Ager, and the Mason have declared war on the Christians. And as in every war, the enemy must be defeated even by bloodshed if necessary.
Instead of swinging back in this tremendous battle between these two opposing, radical, extreme ends of the scale. That's got to stop. I've never understood why somebody would join together in this band of people and call himself a Democrat and not vote for anybody else if they're not a Democrat. That concept is beyond my understanding. And Republicans and Libertarians and Populists and Communists and Socialists and this and that, and blacks and whites and Indians, and there are so many sects and groups and segments, and we're so fragmented that getting together is going to really be difficult. But we've got to do it. Because if we don't wake up and do it ourselves, these men who meet in secret and plot the manipulations are going to do it whether we want it or not, and they're going to do it at the point of a gun. And they're going to take away everybody's freedom because they don't consider us responsible.
Capable of having that freedom.
Are capable, or even of using our intellect. So they'll put us in shackles and control us and force us to be peaceful. That's what the plan is, and that's what the New World Order is all about.